Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us on today's broadcast. It's such an exciting one. We have Professor Bolaji Akinyemi here in the house. He's going to be hosting this program. It promises to be a really exciting one. There are loads and loads of questions that people have submitted that the Prof will be responding to. I'm sure the Prof has some initial welcome words that he wants to say to you. Prof.
Thank you. I really feel very honored that you will be joining me live on this program. I've been looking forward to this since the studio approached me about the program, and I can assure you I will be frank in answering your questions. I will not mislead you. Believe me, you have my word on that. Once again, thank you for joining me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Prof, for that. And we'll just go straight into the questions. Actually, before I do that, some of us might be wondering, how do you ask questions during this session? So there are a number of ways to ask your questions. You can either go to slido.com and the event number is there, 52139. 52139. That comes directly to us in the studio. You could also go to Facebook and you go to YouTube, and those questions will come directly to us in the studio as well. And we just might pop your question up on the screen. Thank you for that. Thank you, Prof. So the first question we have here is this. It says, you have been out of government for a long time. Why do you feel this is the right time to comment more frequently on international affairs?
Well, thank you for that question. COVID-19 is laying a foundation for a new economic order and a new political order, which combined is going to give us a new world order. And this is the right time for African voices to be heard. I'm not going to pick on any particular television station, but I monitor the international news agencies, and I have discovered that African voices have been muted, as if we don't matter, as if we have nothing to contribute, as if we are just going to be consumers of whatever is served on the table after COVID-19. And I simply thought, this is not right. That's why I've come out of retirement mentally, and I'm prepared to at least be a voice, one of the African voices. I hope that doing this will encourage other African scholars to also come out and put in African values, African desires, what Africa can contribute to the new world order that is going to come after COVID-19.
Wow. Now, for some of our viewers, I wonder if such would exist who wouldn't know about the professor. But let me just give you a brief background of who Professor Bolaji Akinyemi is. He's a professor of political science. He obtained his doctorate degree from the prestigious Oxford University. He was also an instructor of politics of the developing nations in Boston. He was also a visiting professor of African Studies at the DePaul University in Indiana. After that, he was also a visiting professor of political science in Michigan. Now, he's taught, he's lectured also at the University of Ibadan in Nigeria. He's been on numerous international assignments. He was Nigeria's Minister of External Affairs between 1985 and 87. And he's also been a member of many reputable bodies, international organizations, and he's a prolific writer. And what I say is this: with this kind of resume, when it comes to international affairs, when it comes to diplomatic matters, the professor is the best you will get out there. That's as good as it gets. And we've got an expert in the house to deal with your questions on all these international issues. Now, Prof, a question we have for you is this, and I'm sure the world is aflame now for one key point and some words that said, "I can't breathe." I'm sure you have seen the video. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, let me start by expressing my deepest condolences to the family of Mr. Floyd. And as they start the processes of burying him, our thoughts and our spirits, even in Africa, are with the family. I also must say that we in Africa share with the Africans in the diaspora, and by that I mean all blacks in the diaspora. We share with them their pain at what happened to that man. I saw the video. I've seen that video several times. And I've seen also other videos that I'm starting to think, what is it about the police and neck of black people? Not only just kneeling on the neck, at times they even grab the neck in an attempt to subdue somebody who's not even resisting. Now, let's not beat about the bush. Africans in the diaspora have had a raw deal. I'm not going to, deliberately, I'm not going to use the term slaves. These were human beings who were enslaved. And Africans will not be the only people to be enslaved. The British were enslaved by the Romans. During the period of the Roman Empire, they marched all over Europe enslaving people. The Chinese, had enslaved other people in Asia. Even during the time when there was an Indian empire, they also were busy enslaving people. So we are not to be enslaved. So I don't like that term, slaves. We people who were enslaved, just like other people were enslaved. What was different about us was the color of our skin, because that then became a permanent negative badge by which we then became tagged in a negative way. So this has been going on for about 500 years. What happened last week? So let's not forget that. And so but You know, at times, good comes out of evil. I must say, I am pleasantly surprised that all over the world, there have been demonstrations. And mark you, these demonstrations are taking place at a time of COVID-19 fear. Obviously, people don't care. They just feel that the travesty that had happened justify their overcoming their fear of COVID-19 and coming out to march. The death of that man has led to a global response. And I hope that that global response will be built upon, because often what the evil people want is for us to forget. After 1 week, after 2 weeks, to forget. And what is happening, the intensity of the reaction is ensuring that nobody will forget what happened to that man.
Wow. Wow. But, Professor, can this systemic racism be eliminated?
I pray so. I hope so. But I am not sure. You see, you can change your religion. So, any negative attachment to religion, you can overcome by changing your religion. You can change your name. Take on an English name, and unless I see your face, I won't be sure. So, any discrimination based on names can be overcome. But discrimination based on the color of your skin, it is difficult to overcome, because that's the first thing others say about you, is the color of your skin, whether it is white or whether it is black. And if it is black, there is that ingrained emotion that is immediately aroused. And you will really need to be a very cultured, civilized, educated individual to then quickly overcome that repulsion. What's the percentage of cultured, educated, civilized people in the world as a percentage of the total population? Are you talking about 1%? 2%? Not more than that. So I'm sorry. I wish I could be optimistic, but I am not.
Wow. Wow. Still on this issue of George Floyd and the way different nations of the world have responded. We're seeing things in Germany, we're seeing things in the UK, and many countries of the world. People are responding to this. Was there anything the US could have done to have stopped this from becoming what it is today?
Are you talking about the demonstration?
The
or
demonstrations?
You are talking about Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
The demonstration?
Yes.
No. There is nothing the US could have done. You see, what the African Americans are saying is that they have demonstrated too many times, and there have not been systemic changes. Cosmetic changes, yes. Oh, the chief of police is then either black or a Latina or mixed race or whatever have you. But the police force itself is still basically a racist force that does the kind of thing that you saw. And don't forget that I don't want to give the wrong figure, because I promised you that I wasn't going to mislead you. But the fact is, this shooting by police, shooting of black people by police, is almost an everyday occurrence. And it's not even limited to one state. It's really all over the United States. So, and yet, very few policemen are convicted. They go back to being business as usual once the demonstration is over. And I think that even look at what initially happened. The one policeman was going to be charged with third-degree murder, which will have carried a nominal sentence. It's part of the consequences of the demonstration that now the Attorney General of the state took over the investigation and now decided to charge all the 4 policemen. So already we've seen a shift, but not enough. Even as the Attorney General said yesterday, they're not sure they will get a conviction. It's very difficult to get a white jury to convict white policemen for the murder.
Do you think, sir, that the reason the Attorney General may have come out now to charge the other people was because of the public outcry, or was it on the weight of the evidence?
No, the weight of the evidence justifies it. The weight of the evidence had always been there when the district attorney decided to charge only one policeman. It is the force of the public reaction, the revulsion, the intensity of the revulsion by the public that now led the Attorney General to interpret the evidence that has always been there in a more proactive way.
Wow, wow. Before we leave this point on racism and the impact that is having, have you personally, looking at your background, you studied in the US, in the UK, have you had any experience of racism that you can refer to as a notable experience?
Oh yes, you can't avoid it, but none to that extent. I was never subjected to any physical assault. No. However, you see, at the time when I was there, and this was in the 60s, being an African made a difference. They could tell we were few, and they could tell from your accent that you were not an American. And the moment they heard you speak, immediately the police would change their attitude. I remember once I was coming back from the library to go to the Hall of Residence. This was around 11:30 at night. And all of a sudden, I heard the sound, the siren of the police van. Of course, I knew. I stopped. This policeman came out and said, "Drop the books." I dropped them. "Hands on the wall." I put my hands against the wall. "Spread your legs." I spread my legs. And then he said, "Where are you coming from?" And I said, "I'm coming from the library." He said, "Huh? Sergeant, he talks funny. Where are you from?" I said, "I'm from Africa." "Put down your hands, put down your hands." And the same policeman now bent down to collect my books that I had dropped. Where was I going? I said, "I'm going to Johnson Hall." This was in Philadelphia. "Get into the car. Let us take you. You shouldn't be walking the streets at night. It's dangerous." Do you know what? When they dropped me in the hall, both of them ended up taking my telephone number and then invited me to their separate homes to
Wow.
meet their family and have dinner, because we were we were a strange, element, at that time. Now this wouldn't happen now, because there are so many Africans in the United States. It wouldn't happen now. They will actually put that gun to my head until I can. I mean, look at Diallo. Diallo was shot
Yeah.
in New York. I think about 20 bullets fired into his back. And you know where he was? He wanted to enter his own house, his own residence. He was in front of his own door trying to get in. When they asked him to stop, he stopped, and he wanted to bring out his ID card, and they opened fire on him and killed him. So things have changed.
Wow.
I just laugh now when I remember my own experiences.
Wow. Now, there's a question here which I think has always been a big question in people's minds, where President Obama released a toolkit in a statement he gave earlier on in the week. And some of the comments are, you get people that leave government, presidents and policymakers, and then start to prefer solutions to some of these challenges. And for someone who had been the president of the United States, the question was this: why are you now coming up with this solution? Couldn't you have done something in the last 8 years that you were there? What do you have to say to that sort of comment?
Well, I sympathize with that comment. I don't believe that Barack Obama found the right balance. I can understand his difficulties. The first black president, he has to carry himself in such a way that other blacks will be accepted into not only that office but into any public office. Whereas if he had gone in and behaved like a civil rights activist, then people would say he was not presidential. So he spent his 8 years being presidential, and I'm afraid he didn't get the balance right. So I sympathize with the view that it's too late, in the day. However, it's not only Obama who exhibits this kind of characteristics. Even Blair in London and Brown in London, they all, and I don't want to mention names of the ones in Africa, but after they leave office, they now become statesmen. And that irritates me a lot, because I'm always saying, what did you do when you were there? When you had the opportunity, when you had the power to make changes, to be different, you didn't do all of this. Either you played politics, and then now that you are no longer there, you asked me a question at the beginning. Why have I been silent?
Yes.
It's precisely because, I was never a head of state, but in most cabinets, Minister of External Affairs or Minister of Foreign Affairs is almost next to the president in terms of status and what have you. I have been so mindful of not peeping over the shoulder of people who took over from me and became ministers, as if I know it all. So I've kept quiet. I made my own mistakes. I made my own successes. Let them make their own mistakes. Let them achieve their own successes. That's actually why I have been quiet. But not these ones who are then, busy pretending to be statesmen when they cannot make any changes. However, having said all that, these are not normal times. So I don't blame Obama for coming out. Even George Bush had also issued a statement. I welcome their intervention. These are not normal times in the world. And Trump is not a normal person who should be treated normally.
Oh, why do you say that
Well,
about Trump?
read the letter written by his former Secretary of Defense, a four-star retired general of the Marines, unheard of, that a member of your cabinet who has left your cabinet will now write such a vitriolic, intense letter of condemnation. It's all there that Trump is determined to set one American against another, one race against another, one section against another, that is an immature leader. In fact, what the letter said was that, there has been an absence of mature leadership in the 3 years that Trump has been president of the United States. That the man is determined to be president of only the crudest wing of the United States, rather than all members of the United States.
From your vantage point.
Sorry?
I said from your vantage point, if
Yes.
you were to point to a success of President Trump since he took over government, what would that be?
Oh, the economy. Let us give the devil his due. The economy. Even though he inherited a good economy from Barack Obama, but he, either through sheer luck or a throw of the dice, he's been able to build up the American economy before COVID-19 struck. Employment had gone up tremendously. If you look at the what do you call it? The prices of shares on the stock market had gone up tremendously. He'd done very well for the economy.
Okay.
But that's all.
It's interesting there. Not much to talk about on the successes. But let's come closer home in terms of Africa. I think there's another issue that is kind of building up in Africa, And that's the situation with the Africa Development Bank and the interference of the US in the process of electing a new leader for a new term in that bank. What do you think about the situation going on there?
Let me give you a little bit of the background, just a little bit, before I answer your question. Up until 1982 or so, only African countries had shares in the African Development Bank. It was in 82 that, against the advice of President Shagari of Nigeria, the other African leaders voted to allow non-African countries to now invest in the bank. Of course, they did this with malice aforethought. They were targeting Nigeria because Nigeria had the highest number of shares, highest investment there. Yeah. And they wanted Nigerian influence to be brought under control. So they voted for non-Africans to now buy shares and become shareholders. Now the chicken had come home to roost. Because it is the United States that is now leading the pack to get rid of the best president of the African Development Bank that bank had ever had. Nobody questions the achievement of Dr. Akinyemi, whom I happen to know very well. Nobody. And this will be the first time that a Nigerian actually will be president of that bank, in spite of the fact that we have the highest percentage of shares attached to a particular country. America would not have accepted this. In fact, from the beginning, America would have insisted, like they did, at the World Bank, only an American can be president of the World Bank. The International Monetary Fund, only Frenchman or woman can be president of the International Monetary Fund. We didn't insist that, given our number of shares, we should always be president of the African Development Bank. And the Americans and the Europeans had always ganged up to defeat any Nigerian candidate until Dr. Adesina became the candidate. He's performed so well. Everybody says that. And now you have this, scrupulous allegations made against him. According to the system and the processes of the bank, the ethics committee examined every single allegation made against him, and they found him not guilty. The United States is still saying no. They want an external body, which is not provided for in the Articles of Association of the bank. It's unconstitutional. What the Americans say they want, to bring in an external body. I've been long enough to know how the system works. That external body will work to the answer. They will find what is not even there, what the man is not even accused of. They will find that. So I am happy, I must say this, I am happy that the African heads of states have put down their feet. I'm happy at the position taken by the Nigerian president, that he was going to back Dr. Adesina completely to the very end. They should resist it, because if they don't, what America wants to do is to destroy the African Development Bank. That's what they want to do. That's the objective.
Is that because it represents competition to them in any way?
Yes, two ways or three ways. One, the agricultural program. You see, Dr. Additional is an agricultural expert. Agriculture is one of the ways that the United States uses in dealing or in bringing pressure to bear on developing countries. They've been trying to sell us this artificial crops, which once you grow those artificial crops, it destroys your own crop, and yet you cannot replant them. You continually then have to import them from the United States. Additional had come up with a blueprint in the bank to boost African agriculture. That is one. The second is that they feel that the African Development Bank, under Additional, had been more receptive to Chinese investments in Africa, whereas they want somebody who will put a stop to Chinese investments. They feel that Additional has not bought into that their own narrative. And thirdly, if Additional spends another term, the African Development Bank will be one of the most powerful financial institutions in the world. And America doesn't want that. Tell you the truth, the French doesn't want that. I'm not sure about the attitude of the British, but definitely the Americans and the French don't want that.
Wow, wow, that is a lot of very insightful points there, Prof. Very insightful. Now, still on the Additional issue here, we know that he's got the results. He's driven the bank to a point where it's become that enviable bank, as you have said. But can he crack under the weight of this?
Unfortunately, yes. Even if he's re-elected, psychologically, he will continue to be under blows by the Americans. They will continue to, nip at his heels. They will continue to come up with one issue or the other to slow him down. And I've gone through this. When you are under criticism, under attack, you then become a little self-conscious. You're no longer the, gallant achiever that you have been. You will always then be looking at your shoulder as to who is sniping at you. So I can see that as a consequence of what the Americans are doing. So if they can't stop him, they would then slow him down.
Wow. All right. It feels to me that this is a very good segue into the next question, which is really starting to look at the response of the World Health Organization to some of the possible solutions to COVID-19 coronavirus, and the initial rejection of what was coming out of Madagascar as a cure for this. What do you have to say about that, sir?
Well, I hate to end up in a position that may be seem to be on the same side as Trump, God forbid. But I think that the World Health Organization has not played its role in a creditable way. It's been more of, in terms of its relationship to Africa, it's been more of a European organization, being more receptive to the narratives of European scientists, narratives of European, policy makers. And I'm not surprised about that, even though the Director General is from Ethiopia. But look at all the people he surrounded himself with there. How many are Africans? How many are from the developed countries? Not just Africa. How many? Very few. And that's why, in fact, the very first country to challenge WHO over the hydrochlorine, or which I call Nivaquine, is India. India said, we have found that the hydrochlorine is working here. It was after that that even Nigeria now said, we have found the hydrochlorine useful in Nigeria. NAFDAC came out with a statement that they have found that they were responding to stimulus from Europe. Now, Europe doesn't have malaria, and therefore they are not likely to have in their DNA the hydrochloroquine. Whereas in countries like, or in areas like Asia, Latin America, Africa, where malaria is endemic, hydrochloroquine is likely to have become part of our DNA. And to that extent, we will not be showing the kind of negative reaction that Europeans were showing. And yet, the WHO was embracing the European narrative. Now, right now, they've now come back a few days ago to say they are going back to the hydrochloroquine tests. I think after all the brouhaha about their previous situation. The same thing then goes now for WHO's attitude towards the natural medicine from not only Africa, Asia, and the Chinese as well. But we need to be careful. I can understand the scientific mind. We need to show that it works. We need to show the quantity you need to take and not just down half of the bottle.
Yeah, but
You
sir,
know
Prof,
the system now in Africa. You just take a whole whatever it is. If that works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. No, but I
yes.
can understand the need to be careful about the kind of insisting on the kind of tests that
Yes.
any treatment needs to go through.
But
To
Prof,
prove
do we
that
need to always listen to the West to validate African solutions? Can't we validate our own things?
But that's what we are doing. I mean, the Madagascar lotion has gone around all Africa. They didn't wait. They narrative on it. It's gone around all Africa.
Wow. Well, Prof, we are 45 minutes in already. And there's still more questions here that we have to go through. But the good news for our viewers here is that next week, Thursday, same time, 7 p.m. BST, we will be back again with more questions for the Prof to answer, and we'll take more of your questions next week. Prof, thank you very much. Do you have any last parting words for your viewers?
I have enjoyed this interaction. I have found the questions very stimulating, very challenging, and I'm happy that has given me an opportunity, even though I seem to have been the one doing most of the talking, but it is through my answers I was interacting with our friends, who are sending in the questions. It's been a wonderful session for me. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you next week.
Next week. Fantastic. Thank you very much, our viewers. Again, like, subscribe, share this message. Let's get the message out there. There will be more engaging questions next week. We look forward to seeing you. Thank you for joining us this evening.